Hi, this is the Cat's Library. I'll be your librarian today. In this video, I'll draw an animal from a reference photo. I've been working with getting my scripts the right length so that the footage isn't sped up too fast. We'll just have to see how I do today. Engage speed paint! This photo doesn't specify what type of tortoise this is, and I did not look it up later. I want to start with explaining the drawing because why not? I'll go on to the animal research afterwards. I had a low opacity thick brush to start out with in green because tortoises are green. I refined this sketch to have rough indication of scales, the ridges or whatever they're called on the shell, and tweaked the overall shapes of the shell. I had initially gone with a more cartoonish oval while the reference shell was a more complicated mix between a box and sphere. In a similar method to the subject, I roughed out the background with the same brush but different colors. I shaded in the ground. This particular ground layer remained into the final image. I made a quick pencil sketch for the tortoise. Looking back, I sort of ruined the head a bit because I first drew it smaller and at a sharper angle, and then I made it bigger and more of a 90-degree angle. I didn't realize this until it would take an unreasonable amount of reworking different layers. After the sketch, I followed the same technique I used on the last video, but blocking in the flat colors before I'd committed to a final line art layer. I also blocked in the colors for the background along with some messy gradients. Unlike the salamander, this animal had scales and grooves that required very specific line art like shading, and so I accidentally added line art back in as shading layers. I kept the body and shell of the tortoise on separate layers. Each had its own batch of various clipping layers, which can't go outside the flat colors that I set them to, and a few layers that I used on top of both the clipping layers and the original layers. The clipping layers started with some layers with the purpose of color variation. Then I moved on to highlights and shading. There was endless tweaking because I have a problem with using colors to shade, and this changes everything that I've already established. This has been a long-running problem throughout this series. I need to try the technique where you shade first in black and white and then add the colors later. I spent an hour at the end of the process working on the background and was sort of worried that I was repeating the kangaroo video, where I didn't time manage the background and animal well at all. Looking back at all of the footage, I spent the majority of the time on the subject animal, and so it shouldn't be too bad. One of what I'm going to presume to be palm trees had a bunch of dead brown leaves or something, and I tried to get that right a few times before deciding that the way I was drawing it was cluttering the composition. I think I have improved at drawing rocks and leaves from this series, but I would have to go back and look at my previous works to know for sure. So something that I learned just now writing the script is that turtle is more of a category that can include tortoises. Tortoises live on land and thus have legs instead of flippers. Tortoises are herbivores and other turtles are omnivorous. I'm going to try to focus on tortoises specifically for a bit now. Tortoises live a long time, typically from 80 to 150 years, though one specific tortoise called Adwaita is estimated to have lived to 255. Tortoises have clutches of 20 or under eggs. Depending on the species, this is usually 1 to 2 eggs, which they bury and then leave alone. Baby tortoises have an egg tooth and egg sac and have a slightly more omnivorous diet, including worms, before fully converting to veganism later in life. Apparently, it is common for male tortoises to have more shell over their necks, while females tend to have longer claws, which likely means that this is a female that I'm drawing. Males also have longer tails. Now, when it comes to stories about tortoises, there is one particularly famous fable about the tortoise and the hare. You've probably heard it before, but why not have my own variation in here? I also found a Native American myth about how the world was flat and on the back of a turtle. Now on to the Aesop's fable. There once was a hare who ran around all day saying how great he was. He would do that thing where he'd put his hand out for a handshake and then jerk it away at the last second saying, "Too slow!" even if the other animal knew it was coming and dove for the hand. He would insult people and then run away before they could react. One day he set his sights on the old tortoise, who everyone respected. Basically what he said was, "So great, I can run faster than you." But a bit more rude and mocking than just that. The tortoise gave a grim smile and said, "Okay, punk, how about our race? Speed isn't all that matters. There's also endurance." "I can do endurance too. This is gonna be easy." On the day of the race, the hare charged ahead slightly before the judge finished calling out "go." The tortoise waited a few seconds until he was sure that the judge, who was a crow, was finished, and began walking ahead at a steady yet slow pace. The hare raced on ahead, stopped, waited for a butterfly to cross the track, ran more, got confused at a fork in the road, and ran around a tree a couple times to make sure he knew where he was going, and hopped along the trail again. He got within sight of the finish line and stopped. He looked back and couldn't see the tortoise at all. He stretched and looked back again. Still nothing. He ran back a bit. The tortoise was further along than the hare thought he would be, but he was still abysmally behind. The hare ran back all the way to the starting line, and then he ran nearly the entirety of the course, turned around just before he reached the finish line, and did the course twice more, laughing maniacally the whole time. On the end of the third run, he looked back and still didn't see the tortoise, and so he went onto the side of the road and went to sleep. Throughout everything, the tortoise never slowed down at all and stayed at the same speed the whole time. He had walked this path many times and knew every blade of grass, every stone, every turn in the path. The tortoise came forward and forward and forward again, and by the time the hare finally woke up, the tortoise was crossing the finish line. Okay, so now for my summary of a CliffsNotes version of an English translation of an oral tradition indigenous creation story. As always, the links to my research are in the description. I'm not sure how accurate this is, but I liked the story and I wanted to share. Apparently, a flat earth that is held on the backs of tortoises or turtles is a common idea that shows up in different places of the world. There was an upper world that had a type of humanish people and a lower waterish world full of monsters. A woman was pregnant with twins and sank from the upper world into the lower world. The monsters saw her coming, and a turtle volunteered to break her fall, and the other monsters covered its shell with earth so that the woman would be more at home. The turtle grew to be about the size of the world, and plants started growing on its back. And then the rest of the story is about the twins making everything else in creation, and one being good and the other more evil, and the competition between them, and the turtle didn't really make another appearance. So that should be it for today. There will be more videos from this channel eventually. I have a couple ideas for videos that I want to try out before I get back to the series. I'll see you when I see you. Bye!